Greetings, beautiful people, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast, brought to you by the National Network of State Teachers of the Year. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Warren Jr., an award-winning educator, speaker, and professor, also known as RH Warren Jr. on social media, and we are thrilled that you are here. Special shout out to sponsors from the NEA Foundation. This is the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast, a podcast for educators, by educators, where we transcend the limits and unlock the true potential of education. Today, we are continuing to explore the heart of our initiative, the Teaching Beyond the Barriers course. This episode offers an insider look at the course, how it began, its objectives, and the transformative impact it is having on educators and students alike. Join me and Dr. Jemelleh Coes as we pull back the curtain on this innovative approach to student-affirming education and how we explore teaching beyond the barriers and how it is shaping educators of tomorrow and why this work matters more now than ever. Welcome to the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast, Dr. Coes. It is great to have you here.
It is such a pleasure to be in the room with you. Anytime I get to be in a room with you is a pleasure. So it is so good to see you, Dr. Warren.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I know this is going to be a fantastic episode, but before we begin, can you tell the listeners who you are, your role in education, and a couple of your top accomplishments? I know you have many, but just a couple of your top accomplishments. All right.
Not as many as you, but I'm getting there. So my name is Jemelleh Coes. I am the Director of Teacher Leadership at Mount Holyoke College. I am also a professor at the University of Georgia. I am a board member for the National Network of State Teachers of the Year. And I helped develop this coursework with Dr. Richard Warren, Mr. Josh Parker, which he always feels like a doctor to me with all of his brilliance, Dr. Meg, and then the people who just continue to lead the work, Justin and Brianna and all of the people who are just such strong partners in this work. I was a Georgia Teacher of the Year. I taught in the special education and the general education setting. My focus was math and ELA, but ELA is where my heart lives. I just love what we can do with language. I just love what we can do in community with people. Now I teach about teacher wellness. I teach about social justice in education and thinking about how we make a world not only where we all can survive, but we all can thrive. Thank you, Dr. Bettina Love, for that language. I was a Lowell Milken Fellow for Unsung Heroes. I sit on several boards throughout Georgia and nationally, just that really focus on education and how we make the world a better place for all people. I focus on disability as well. I think that we all can create a place where everyone gets to belong, inclusive of disability, thinking about what are the assets that everyone brings to the table and how can we leverage those assets to make a better society for us all. Let's see, we can stop there. I think that's good.
Yeah, I mean, as you can all tell, Jemelleh is truly a gem for our profession. And I can't wait to dive into some of these critical concepts and ideas and thoughts about education. And so just pulling back and kind of getting to the origin story and the inspiration behind the Teaching Beyond the Barriers course. Talk to me about what was the spark? Like, what was the motivation behind creating the Teaching Beyond the Barriers course? And why do you believe its focus on student affirming education is critical at this point in history?
Absolutely. So this work, gosh, it started so long ago. It started even before the world sort of became aware of the idea of what was happening with communities that had been traditionally marginalized and had to be historically resilient. So I would say that this work started probably just as thoughts between Josh and I of what the world could be and how we could help educators to be able to create that world. So maybe in about 2015, we started just thinking about what might it be for educators to lead the way in widening the screen for the rest of the world. So in about 2015, we just started partnering, thought partnering, and really dreaming, like freedom dreaming, like vision dreaming. And so that occurred for about 3 years before we started to bring other people on that were thinking in the same ways that we were thinking. But it was sometimes difficult to find those people that were ready for what feels sort of radical, right? It feels sort of big, it feels sort of heavy. But we found people little by little, educators who were really thinking um, uh, about society and thinking about like how can they make a difference individually and collectively. So in about 2018 we started to bring people together, people of all walks of life, all various backgrounds and demographics, and we started to think together. So in about 2020, um, a lot of our education partners came on board and they were like, you know what, this is good work. This is good work. The world sort of became
Mhm.
aware of injustices that were happening. And a lot of our education partners, like the NEA Foundation, um, uh, ETS, the Educational Talents System, um, and there were a couple of other partners, Curriculum Associates, a few other partners that were just like, this is important work and we would like to support you in developing coursework for teachers. So I think it was the Great Awakening. I like to call it the Great Awakening of 2020
Yeah.
that sort of launched this work, even though we had been mulling over it for quite some time. But that is what got the start. And we knew the educators were ready because we had been talking to them. We knew
Yeah.
that they wanted to be thinking about something differently and critically. Um, so that sort of that's the origin story of this
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, I think it's so critical and so important to like see that whole thing unfold because you all were preparing before the opportunity came, right? You all were dreaming and you were visioning this, and it just so happened that the right time came and you already had this concept or this idea of what you wanted to see and what you wanted to um be realized through education. And so I think preparation, the dreaming, the framework was already laid. So when the opportunity came, it was like, okay, we can hit the ground running. And now we have the course, we have everything pretty much laid out. And we started building on the 5I discussion: identity, investigation, intervention, introspection, and impact. In my conversation with Josh, he illuminated how the 5I model is meant to be mile markers along the road of becoming the type of educator that can deliver the instructional practices and improve outcomes for all students. So, reflecting on his insights, how do you personally navigate these mile markers in your own journey to foster an environment where every student thrives?
Absolutely. So they are absolutely mile markers on what you described as this roadmap, right? Um, but not only are they're mile markers that we sort of meet and we move on to, but they're also mile markers that we can backtrack to, right? So this process is a process that yes, we move from one eye to the next eye to the next eye, but we might get to eye number three, might get to introspection and be like, you know what, actually I need to move backwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we might get to intervention and we might say, actually, I need to go backwards one more time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
these eyes serve as mile markers and checkpoints for us, but it also serves as a circular process, right? Like a process that we can rewind and go back to when we need to sort of sharpen our skills where we find that, oh, I missed something here, or I'm now
Mm-hmm.
thinking about something differently here. I now have collected new information that can inform my next step differently. I
Mm-hmm.
love the I process because you always know where you are. I think for us just as humans, it is so important for us to be intentional and knowledgeable about like where we are physically, where we are
Yes.
mentally, where we are spiritually, where we are emotionally. And if we can hold on to those things and know where we are, then we can move forward differently in a way that feels whole and
Mm-hmm.
healing for ourselves. So the 5I model not only allows us this roadmap with mile markers, but it allows us to heal ourselves and go back when we need to along the way.
So, can you give a story or a narrative of how these mile markers have played a role in your personal practice?
Absolutely. So let me tell you what, as an educator who is dedicated to creating student affirming places, it can, like, in all honesty and fullest transparency, it can be sometimes difficult because you are constantly interrogating who you are and the knowledge you have and where you gain that knowledge from in order to be better. So, being better actually takes some effort. It actually causes you sometimes some discomfort, and maybe some discomfort in ways that you were not necessarily prepared for. But once you start doing it, you get used to the discomfort. Um,
Yes.
so I
Yep.
will tell you, so like I live, like a part of me always is sort of like in a space of like, this could get uncomfortable, but what are you going to do after you have now been exposed to this discomfort? Are you going to be better as a result, or are you going to retreat as a result? And for me, it is always, next time I'm going to be better. So one of the ways that that has shown up in my practice is as a special education teacher. Even in my teacher training, it was always like, how do you um, think about um, making sure that students are successful? And sometimes for some people, that meant that you would lower the expectations for students. But what I realized is that that taught students that I did not believe in their ability to do more.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was doing all of their interventions, thinking about how do I make this a little bit more accessible for them, but what I was actually doing was making it something that wouldn't improve their learning, that wouldn't improve their quality of life. So I was
Yeah.
doing the intervention part of it, but then like I went into introspection and I was like, actually, this is not at all what I intended to do. So I had to go back to what interventions look like. And interventions look like, when I went back, talking to parents, thinking about the assets that that student brought into the classroom, and honing in on those assets and highlighting them not only for that student, but for everyone else who thought that this student deserved something other than what they could actually, something other than what we expected from other students and what we were preparing other students for. Um, so I think that process of introspection is so important and so critical for me all the time, because, and for all of us, because we, in all good faith, we think we're doing the right thing. I never believe that a teacher goes into a classroom and they're like, I am intentionally going to do the wrong thing for this student.
Right.
Like, we don't do
Yeah.
that, right?
Mm-mm.
Like, we
Mm-hmm.
go in and we believe that what we are doing is the right thing. But then when we move into introspection and we reflect on all that we had done, we reflect on our identity, we reflect on how we've been investigating and what we've been investigating. We reflect on the interventions that we've been giving. And then we're like, actually, I think I actually might have unintentionally
Mm-hmm.
caused harm that I didn't intend to cause. So what do we
Yes.
do with that?
Mm.
So that five eyes guides us on that path to be able
Yes.
to be the reflective educators that we need to be.
See, I already knew you had it. I already knew you had it brewing. That's why I wanted to pull it out. Like, because, like, seriously, even for me, as I would consider myself a seasoned educator, there are points in times where I have to look at certain things on the spectrum of the five eyes and be like, okay, did I do everything that I wanted to do? And have I arrived where I needed to arrive in? And a lot of the cases, it's like, yes for some, no for others. And so I think it's important to have professional development as such that can walk you through, just like you said, because we want to make sure that our intent is making the same impact that we wanted to make. And
Awesome.
so when we think about refining professional development, how does the Teaching Beyond the Barriers course refine the landscape of professional development for educators?
Mm, there's so many things about this Teaching Beyond the Barriers course that I love. But I think a couple of things that come to mind is that it is intentional. When we create a plan toward progress and create a plan to be better, or create a plan to be thoughtful, or create a plan to connect with our students differently, or create a plan to learn about our students differently, or create a plan to be intentional about our practice. When we are intentional about the creation and the thoughts, then we can make change. And what the Teaching Beyond the Barriers course does is allow us to interrogate our practice so that we can be intentional about the changes that we can make. And we can know exactly where they occur, right? Like when you are driving, you are intentional about looking at this thing, thinking about this thing, and this thing, right? And when we get really good at driving, we can start to anticipate things that maybe we hadn't anticipated before, right? So for a new driver, it's about, all right, I'm going to make sure that I am doing all of the things that I know I am supposed to do. But once you get really good at driving, you're like, I am not only doing all of the things I know that I am supposed to do, I am anticipating all of these other things that are happening around me and making sure that I can adjust for those things as well. So this course allows us to do that, allows us to become such good drivers that not only are we doing the things we know we should do, but we are anticipating all the other things that somebody else might do that might impact learning, that somebody else might throw into our classroom that might impact student learning. We're anticipating what students bring into the class. We're anticipating their families. We're anticipating what's happening in our communities. We're anticipating what's happening on the news. It's like we become great anticipators of what happens next. So we can be thoughtful about our practice. And that's what's going to make us better teachers. And that's what this course helps us to do. It helps us to start thinking about things that we haven't thought about yet. And it's not that we haven't thought about it yet because we don't want to think about it. It's just sometimes we haven't been exposed to it. We haven't carved out enough time for it because time is a thing, right? Like we know that the time is not infinite. It is finite. We know that there is only a certain amount of time, but this allows us to carve out the right amount of time that we need in order to be more intentional. And then the other thing is just that I think even as we are becoming these great anticipators, it also creates a space for us to create what I like to think of as hush harbors for ourselves. Now, hush harbors in antebellum America was a place where enslaved people would go just to reflect on their practice and their traditions. And this course carves out a space for us to do that for ourselves. And as a result, it builds community with other educators who are also thinking about and doing the same things.
That was powerful. And if I'm hearing you, I'm hearing a little bit of it's like a personal growth pathway, right? This course places a significant emphasis on personal evolution. And so, and we encourage educators to envision their best selves for their students. And just thinking about that, how does this vision of personal buy-in, your personal evolution, how does that vision influence the way you, Dr. Coes, approach teaching and leadership in your own context?
Oh, goodness. So let me tell you what, personal growth happens at moments where you are like, I don't know that I was ready to grow today. All right.
Right.
I wasn't anticipating growth today. I didn't wear my growth outfit. I didn't have my growth hairdo. I didn't have my growth money in my pocket, right? But it just happens, right? Like growth is sometimes comes at a moment that does not feel convenient for you. It comes at a moment where you probably have a lot of other things going on. But growth is the seed that is planted in you. And the other thing about the Teaching Beyond the Barriers course is that I think along the way as educators, we have had beautiful seeds that have been planted in us. And the course helps us to water those seeds to grow into something beautiful. For me in my practice, it happens every single day that a student is like, that's not my pronoun. Or actually, I prefer person first language versus identity first language, or all the things that come along with having students who have different ways of living in the world, right? Um, so yeah, I think your personal growth is just it is something that is always happening for you as an educator.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love how this course kind of, it's not so prescriptive where we're telling you this is what you should do, this is how you need to go about it. It's more like, here's some tools, here's some guidelines, here's some things to look out for. And what do you actually do? What do you do in your moment, in your classroom, in your space, right? What is it? What is the thing that you do? And then
Sure.
how can we leverage what we know about habit science, about different
Absolutely.
promising practices? How can we leverage that to create the type of educator you want to be? And so I think,
And
yeah,
yeah,
jump in.
so yeah, just connected to that is like I think that additionally, as you are growing as an educator and you're reflecting on your practice and you're like thinking about this course, it allows you to enter the space and enter the reflection of self with curiosity, right?
Yes.
I think rather than being hard on yourself and rather than being hard on society and systems and all of the things that we are, thinking about that we know impacts our classroom, it allows us a space to approach it with curiosity. The what if, what can be, what should be, why is it this way? And I
Mhm.
think that that entry point of curiosity um, allows us to just come into it with a different orientation than we would when we are doing it on our own or we're frustrated or other things like
Mhm.
that are occurring within our practice.
I love how you worded that, and I love how you did it so gracefully to kind of flip the script a little bit because, navigating educational challenges can be hard, right? And there are some hurdles that educators will encounter as they begin to imply or apply these student affirming principles, right?
That's right.
So, so how does this course kind of equip these educators to overcome those challenges when they try to implement student affirming principles in their practice? How does this course
Mm,
help them overcome that?
mm. So first of all, I am glad that we named that because there are real challenges that come
Mhm.
along with it with doing this work. Um, and some of those challenges, sometimes they're very real, and sometimes they are just perceived. But even our perceptions can feel really real sometimes,
Mhm.
right? So to acknowledge that some of them are real and knowing what those real ones are, and then for us to step outside of ourselves to say, is this a real one or is this a perceived one? Sort of gets us movement in places and spaces where movement can occur. Where can we plant little seeds, right? Seeds have been planted in us along the way. Where can we plant little seeds that for someone might not grow immediately, but it can grow um, if the seed is planted by an educator who is being thoughtful. So some of the ways, and I just want to acknowledge, I know that in um, many states, there feels like there are um, ways that teachers want to affirm students, but they feel restricted in their ability to affirm students. Um, I think part of it is that we don't always, now, I will quote this with I am often the one that's like, tear down the system and start over. But
Mhm. Mhm.
but I also recognize that there are so many pathways to be able to do good work. And sometimes those pathways are truly like one student at a time, one lesson at a time, talking to
Mhm.
one colleague at a time, talking to one family member at a time. Sometimes change is really incremental. It doesn't have to be this huge thing that we do all at once. It can be a step by step process that we do. It can be in the ways that we are showing up. I think for a lot of my students who meet me, um, they're like, I like my heart changed, my mind changed just because I saw the way that you interacted with other people.
Mhm.
Just because I saw the way that you were thinking about the world. I saw the questions that you were asking, and it made me start to ask the same questions. Um, So I think that teachers can do a lot of the work, and administration in general can do a lot of the work that we hope to see and change just by showing up different, just by being the educator, the reflective person that you would want someone to be. If you, especially if you were living um, in a space or place where you do not feel, where you know that you have students who do not feel affirmed in their identity, and if you want to create a world where other people can create spaces where people can feel affirmed in their identity, so just showing up better than you did yesterday, showing up more open than you did yesterday, more thoughtful than you did the day before, I think is critical and essential.
Man, I think that is so important that people need to hear that that change can be incremental. And one of the things that I love to say, I say, sometimes you don't have to slay the giant with a sword. You can slay it with a pebble.
Hmm.
Right? What are the little small things that you can do within your sphere of influence that can make change?
Hmm.
And I love how a part of the course, like we kind of walk them through the different layers of change, like things that you can change within your sphere of influence, in your classroom, in the decision making. And then we have another layer that might take a little bit more support, policy, structures. Then you have this big layer of like systematic things that might take a long time if you pluck your way at it. And sometimes we can get caught up in like the big things that we don't do the little things, or sometimes we can not do the little things because we're focused on the big things. And so
Hmm.
I think this course helps reframe that you can make change. You just got to see it different, and we help you to unpack that. And so, and thinking about that, I want to think about like vision for the future, right? As the Teaching Beyond the Barriers uh, course looks ahead, what innovations, what expansions do you envision for the course to amplify its influence on affirming education for all students?
So, one of the cornerstones of this work for me um, has been it being in community with other thoughtful educators. I think that that also is one of the cornerstones for a lot of people who have already taken the course. Um, a lot of the people, as we talked about a little bit, time is a thing, right? Like it is difficult for teachers to know where to place their time. But for the people who have taken this course thus far, that Tuesday night that they took it, they made time for it every single time. It was not something that they would want to miss unless they absolutely had to miss. If life just got to them, they had to absolutely miss emergencies, that sort of thing. Any other time, people were there because of the community that this helps to create. And the communities that the Teaching Beyond the Barriers course creates, it lasts far beyond this course, right? You now have a network of educators who are constantly growing and intentional about their growth. So when I think about the future of this course, I think of just like areas, pockets of educators who are continually coming together in a partnership in thought and centering like a joy for this work, centering a happiness for this work, centering a hope for what we can create for students, and just being in community, like having people who will either like challenge and support your thoughts, right? Having people who will keep you in the profession, who will help remind you why you do this thing, who are on this journey with you, right? It is so much easier to do things that might feel hard or feel different or feel new, um, when you do it with community, a community of other people who know how important it is or who want to know how important it is. I think what this course also does, it's not for people, it's not for any one kind of learner or one kind of person who is thinking about student affirming places. It is for people who are like, I just thought about this idea that spaces should be affirming, like, okay, I need to learn more. And it is also for the people who are like, oh, I've been thinking about this since birth, let's get it right,
Right, right.
it is for people like throughout this spectrum of learning, and coming together and learning from each other and growing together. So I would envision just a community of people who stay connected and can stay in the profession to do good work.
Man, absolutely. The old adage, if you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. I
That's
think
it.
this I think it rings true when we talk about, this work and how we truly do need each other to check all areas of our practice, right? Our blind spots, the things we know and things we don't know, and to elevate us, to lift each other up and to support and to celebrate, like you said, to challenge. And so you kind of hit on my last question. It was just like, why? Why teaching beyond the barriers? There are so
Yeah.
many different professional development options out there for educators. Why should educators prioritize the Teaching Beyond the Barriers course? What advantages does it have to offer? Why should they make this the essential choice to be committed to making a difference in educational spaces? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so first off, I want to say that I am not biased at all, but it has been legendarily constructed by some of the most brilliant minds in education. It has been constructed by educators who value the time of educators, who value the expertise of educators, who are educators. Its construction is beautiful. The research behind its construction is solid, 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 solid. The facilitators for the course are brilliant and thoughtful and responsive, and they are truly some of the best educators that I know. And even though, like, I feel like I'm pretty far along the journey, I always learn. Anytime I'm in the room with any of them, I always learn. So I think that this course is that because it is well constructed, it is for educators, by educators, toward the growth of educators, and strengthening our profession, strengthening student learning, strengthening student outcomes, and just an affirming space of joy and celebration. And I think the teachers need all of those things.
Absolutely. It's truly nothing like it. To me, it is definitely one of a kind from its inception until now. And I'm just incredibly grateful that you were one of the masterminds and brains in this whole inception. And so, Dr. Coles, I want to thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. It is wonderful, always wonderful to pick your brain and get your insight and to know the amazing work that you're doing. Uh, for those who are watching or listening, to learn more about Dr. Coes' work in education, you can follow her on social media at
Jemelleh Coes on Instagram, www.jemellehcoes.com. And I'm on Twitter a little bit, but not as much as I should be. But you can also check me out on LinkedIn at Jemelleh Coes as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining the 4th episode of the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast. Remember, every conversation, every idea, and every step we take brings us closer to breaking down the barriers and unlocking the true potential of education. Meet us back in the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast for our next episode. Take care, everyone.